the first female Surgeon General of the United States, the first African American Surgeon General of the United States, the 15th Surgeon General of the United States of America, Dr. Joycelyn Elders. The chair. We're going to give you a microphone to hold. Yeah.
I'm afraid I came out in front.
There you go. Can you get up there okay? You want some help?
Yes.
Here, I'll help.
Sorry.
I can help.
Sorry. Yeah.
You all right?
Made it. Thank you.
Wow.
Pleasure. You know, when you get to be 87, you have to have help. When you're young, you don't want help. You're embarrassed for anybody to help you. But after a certain age, you say, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate it, and everybody is excited to hear you talk about your story and your life, and we had a lot of good questions for you. And the first one really is, how did being the oldest child guide your life?
Well, they bought me a mask. I got so busy leaving until I left it in the room.
You want a clear mask? Or you could just put on your mask that you have. That's fine.
Or I'm far enough away from you, it doesn't make much difference, does it? Okay, all right.
That's why I'm sitting way over here.
All right, well,
okay.
Very good. Your question was how?
How did being the oldest child guide your life?
Being the oldest child, I'm the oldest of 8. And being from a very poor family and the oldest of 8 is probably very different than being in a different kind of family and being the oldest of 8. See, we were in a 3-room shack, and I was born in 1933. So that was during the Depression. No running water, no electricity, outdoor privy, so everything, you know. But it's being the oldest of 8 means that I've been a mother hen since I was 10 or 11 years old. I mean, I'm a true mother hen taking care of my younger sisters and brothers. You learn a lot about leadership. You learn a lot about how to get things done. And you learn a lot about compassion. You know, these are your younger sisters and brothers, you want to treat them right. And, you know, I'm very proud frankly, of what I did with these 8 children that was born after me, because now I think they all look to me as a mother hen. The problem is you never get rid of your children. And so I'm ready to divorce all of my children, but they're all wonderful. They were all done very well, and I'm very proud of them. And I don't think any of them walk around talking about how I mistreated them when I was young.
Thank you. How did you decide to become a doctor?
I'm not sure. You know how sometimes you make the right decisions and you don't really quite know how? I saw a lot of suffering, a lot of people who got no health care, not a little bit, none. You know, I remember a young boy in our neighborhood was kicked by a mule. I was in a poor urban farming community and really never even got to the doctor and was in a coma at home for days. But, you know, but then that was not the most convincing thing. I think the other thing was, you know, I saw, you know, all the women were delivered by midwives. You know, not professionally trained midwives. We're talking about women who just took up the job of being the midwife, but everybody knew who they were. You know, they were mothers this, mother. Well, I'm trying to get to how I'm talking about all the things that contributed to my getting to be a doctor. But I grew up really thinking that if I made it out of the cotton patch, my mom always said, you need to get a good education so you can get out of the cotton patch. Well, to my mom and dad, who only had an 8th grade education, we're talking about back in the 40s and black, 8th grade education was not bad, you know, but I grew up feeling that if I got a job working at Dillard's department store as a sales clerk, that would be a miracle. That would get me out of the cotton patch. Well, when I was a senior in high school, a white Methodist woman from the United Methodist Church, and I'm still a good Methodist. They've done a lot for me because without those good Methodists, I'd probably still be in the cotton patch. But I always went to church anyway because I was the only place you had to go when you lived in the country. But they came and they was offering scholarships to the student who had the highest with the valedictorian in our very small country school. And they said that we would get a scholarship to Philander Smith, College, which is a Black United Methodist College in Little Rock, Arkansas. I didn't know you had to apply. We didn't have the money for bus fare. But anyway, my sisters and brothers picked cotton to get enough money for my bus fare for Little Rock, Arkansas. And I want you to know that bus fare was $3.43. We didn't have $3.43, but we got it together. But then when I got to Little Rock, and I went over to thinking I was just, you just walk in. They said, we have no record that you were supposed to be here, no record that you applied. Well, see, we only had enough money for me to get to Little Rock. We didn't have enough money for me to get back home. So all I knew how to do, I felt like such a failure. I went out, I sat out in the hall, and I just started crying. I didn't know it was the president then. The president walked by, and, but he said, little girl, I was 15. I graduated from high school when I was 15. He says, what's the matter? I started to tell him, and all I could do was bawl. Well, he finally said, wait, just go on down to the dormitory, and we'll have somebody see about you in the morning. He obviously knew that we couldn't talk right then. Anyway, that's how I got to Philander Smith College. I still haven't told you how I got to be a doctor. Dr. Edith Irby Jones, who was the first black, she happened to be a woman, but was the first black student to attend to the University of Arkansas Medical School. We were talking about now back in the 40s. We aren't talking about, today. And she came and she talked to our pyramid group. She talked about the difference between the high roads and the low. And she said, in between on the misty paths, the rest walk to and fro. And I was so impressed. From that day forward, the only thing I could ever think about in my life, I wanted to be just like Dr. Jones. Well, I did pretty well. She died in Houston about 6 or 8 months ago, but she became a full professor at Baylor in internal medicine. She was president of the National Medical Association. And so I spent all my life trying to be just like Dr. Jones. And I want to tell you, being a mentor is important. And you never know when you're mentoring. You just don't know. Okay, that's a long story of how I ended up in medicine, but
Could you talk about how you feel about functional medicine and integrative medicine?
well, let me just tell you, I feel that all of medicine to me is very important and very critical. Yeah, I took the long way around. I was a physical therapist. I was a nurse's aide before I became, the VA hospital before I became a doctor. I went to I went out of, I joined the Army to use the GI Bill to go to medical school, as I knew I had absolutely no way of going otherwise. You know, we didn't have the scholarship offers, and even if you could get massive loans and stuff like that, I still, there was no way, I didn't even know about that, and they weren't available. But anyway, being a physical therapist and and then getting out of physical therapy and going to medical school and out of medical school, and I went into research, and I want you to know I'm very pleased, and I feel very strongly that we need to, I hope I'm answering your question, I feel very strongly that we need both functional medicine and integrative medicine if we're going to succeed in our society as we move forward. We need everybody involved, and always remember that everybody has something involved to offer. I know we as doctors felt we we knew everything, we could make all the decisions, and our patients couldn't make the decisions, but I want you to know that we've got to start educating all of our patients so everybody is involved and everybody can help. And this virus has exposed our underbelly, and it's making us know that we can't do it alone, and it does not care who it touches.
Very good. Thank you. Do you know about essential oils, and how do you feel about essential oils?
I think that, I don't know much about essential oils, but I do know a little bit, and I know my daughter-in-law has really sold when we're around and offered essential oils, and every time I complain of ache, she has a different oil she wants to brag for me to try. I usually try. Now, I probably don't do everything she tells me to do, but I do feel that some of them have been very helpful.
Great. Given your military background, you probably have some opinions about PTSD and how we can best help people suffering from PTSD.
Well, obviously, I feel that PTSD is a real problem. And I don't know of anybody who has slick answers of what we do. We can try and we can do. I think the first thing we've got to do is admit that it's an issue and it's a problem, and one that we've got to try and accept and deal with. I don't think we can do much until we can accept it. And I don't know of any, and it's all different. I think, at least from what I know, which is not much, but from what I know, we have to make sure that we find out, look at the patient, address the patient, listen to our patients. We as doctors we aren't good listeners. Some of us are, but many of us are not good listeners. We listen so we can learn, and it's only then that we can really begin to lead. So I do feel that there's a lot that we can do, but I think we've got to listen to whatever they say their problems are, even though we don't necessarily accept them.
That's a really great answer. Thank you. How about, do you have any resources to assist families with addicts?
I probably had a lot more experience with drug addiction than probably, well, I don't know what the people in this room know. Let me just say that my son is a drug addict. And, we always say, well, they're poor, black, poor families and all. Well, this is a son that, whereas I was saying I was from a very poor family, I was always trying to make sure that my children never suffered for anything. That was mistake number one. This he's a wonderful, wonderful young man. He still is. But he still had I, I had a drug addiction. He was treated in what was considered the best places in Little Rock, and he's in Mississippi now, and he was in what was considered the appropriate treatment center for him down in Mississippi. In order for him to go there, cost $35,000 to admit him just to admit him. So I'm saying, but he went there and he did very well. He was, I feel, drug-free for 15 years. He did very well. He got into real estate development. He did very well and was doing very well. And then we all know that drug addiction is a chronic relapsing disease. I feel that he relapsed, but he was in Mississippi, and we didn't know he was relapsing, but I should have known. When all of a sudden he needed money before he was always sending us money, and he had plenty. Well, anyway, I don't know. He's doing, all I can say right now, he's doing okay. I tried to get him into counseling, and we paid for it, and anyway, it's a long-term chronic relapsing disease, and I think that I haven't given up. I'm still working. I'm still trying. I think you keep trying. You can't tell people to give up because you can't. They say, well, don't do this and don't do that. Well, when they're your children, you do everything you possibly can. And I'm always listening, and I'm always trying to do everything I can. And, he's doing okay today. But, you don't know how he's doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You speak a lot about listening, which reminds me, maybe you want to say a few words about what it was like to work for and under President Bill Clinton.
I feel that Bill Clinton was one of the smartest presidents we've had. I really had a lot of respect for him, and I think I really felt that he was a very good president. I think we can talk about some of the things that went on, but as far as I'm concerned, that was a part of his personal life, and I told everybody when they asked me, I said, if Hillary accepts it, it's none of my business. And that's just how I feel about it. But I think that he wanted to do the right things. I think he had a lot of wonderful plans for this country, and I know we worked very hard, and I still feel very badly to try and get better health care, because I personally feel, and I feel that he feels too, that health care should be a human right. We have lots of rights. We talk about this right and that, but I feel that health care should be a human right. We need to educate our young people on how to be healthy, but we also need to make sure that we provide health care for all of our people. We're the only nation of all the industrialized nations that do not provide health care for all of our people. And frankly, I feel we're paying the price for it right now. We say that, we talk about, the blacks, browns, poor, uneducated, all, have far more coronavirus or COVID-19 virus. I just feel that we knew that. We didn't have to wait to get the numbers. We knew that was going to happen. How can you socially distant when you've got three or four families living in a single house? We are paying a very high price for our failing to provide for what I call the social determinants of health. We always think, how great we are. At least I thought that for a long time. I'm a doctor and I make all this difference. Well, when they really evaluated all the problems, they found that doctors only accounted for 10% of the health of our nation. We're the best doctors in the world. We've got the best hospitals in the world, the best nurses in the world, the best research. And look at where we are now. Look at how we're doing with this COVID-19. It exposed our very weak underbelly. And our very weak underbelly is look at our health disparities. Look at our healthcare system. Look at our policing. Look at all of the other things that go to make up all of the problems related to healthcare in America. And, we think, well, the people that work in meat packing companies, the people that, we know that it's the poor, essential workers. They usually like transportation. We don't think about transportation as being an important part of healthcare, but it's health. We have to have good transportation. How do we think most of our nurses and not necessarily our nurses, but certainly many of our nurses' aides and people of that sort get to work using public transportation, and of course they have marked increased exposure. Many of the people that work for us, we don't think about it. Low-wage workers, and then now I think we're all stewing about how in the world and when are they going to reopen schools. Heaven knows I want schools to reopen because we know who suffer the most. The poor kids, the kids whose moms have to come to work for us, and they're most behind, least likely to have a computer or know how to use it, least likely to benefit from in-home learning because they don't have a mom who's sitting there making sure they get their lesson after she's worked all day and taking care of her family and go back home. She just doesn't feel like sitting there and working on making sure they get their lesson. So they're behind, and they're getting further behind. I always say we pediatricians, our children are half as tall as they'll ever be by the time they're 3. They know half as much as they will ever know by the time they're 4. Hope, will, and drive has been determined by the time they're 5. So with them not being able to go to school, they're behind, they're getting further behind. And I don't know the slick answers, but if we had a good public health system with good leadership that could really put out plans for all of us to follow, and there is no slick plan for everybody to follow, because if it was, it would be on TV all day like some of the people we have on TV all day saying some things we don't believe in. But I'm just saying that all of that is a part of what's going on. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. We're coming to the end, so if you could say 30 seconds on the topic of caregiving.
When we think about caregiving, we're talking about very often, we're thinking about our children, young children. We're thinking about our senior citizens, our elderly. And of course, we're talking and thinking about our patients all the time who are sick with disabilities. All of that is an important part of caregiving. And I think that we as doctors have to know that we've got to give compassionate care. We've got to have families involved. We may think, well, we don't need, this is what, we doctors, we wrote out the prescription, you just do what I say. But many of them can't do what I say. Not all of them, have the same cultural values that we have. And it was a very interesting article, I think last week, either in the New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA. It was talking about an 80-plus-year-old woman. I think she got coronavirus. That was why they was putting it in there. And she had said that she never wanted, she didn't want to be incubated. She had already written out how she wanted to be treated. And the doctor, it was in a nursing home, but the nursing home put her in the hospital, and they was doing all the things that, we doctors feel we got to do for everybody. And she had been hooked up to care, and got a lung biopsy and all of those other things. And the doctor said he saw her, and he knew that we have failed this patient totally trying to do the right thing. And I think we have to really think about that. We can't just look at somebody and say, oh, you can look at me and say, I already made sure I got I don't want to be incubated and all the things I want. But, not everybody feels like that. And I think that if someone feels like that we need to respect that. But he said he looked at this lady, and she looked at him, and she was much worse now than she had been, even though, because they was trying to give her super care, and with the lung biopsy, and then her oxygen saturation wasn't quite what it should be, so they were wanting to do some other things. Sometimes we need to let nature take its course. Do everything we can, but if it's not the patient's desire, we should not decide, well, I know what's best for you.
Thank you. You've been one of America's and one of the United States Army's greatest leaders. Could you talk one sentence on leadership?
One sentence on leadership is I can say that as leaders, we need to learn to listen. So you can't lead if you don't listen, if you don't know what the problem is. Learn to listen so you can learn, so you can lead. And I always feel that you've got to be educate so you can communicate. You got to be able, and you've got to know what your community needs, because you can't do the right thing by your community if you don't know what they want. So the thing I should say is we always need to do the very best we can, and know that if we don't know, we can't provide the best of care.
Okay, great. And my last question for you, Dr. Elders, what is the most important thing you ever learned?
The most important thing I think I've ever learned is I did learn to listen to people, and it was a Jesuit priest who taught me about communication. The thing you've got to learn is how to communicate. If you can't communicate, you can't reach people. And so in our speech class, I remember so distinctly, he was telling me, he said, Dr. Elders, you have to bounce it off the wall. He said, you can't read it. He said, if you read it, nobody hears you. So I'm just saying, I think that you would not think a speech class would be, in a Catholic university, would be the most important thing I've ever learned. But I think he taught me more about communication, not more science. But sometimes communication is better than science. But make sure it's truthful, factual, and that you're making sure that you're communicating what's right in science.
Dr. Joycelyn Elders.
Thank you very much. Thank you.